Budge! Budge! Budge!
Some of the stigma around single parenting.
As soon as the single parent card came up, no one wanted to give me...
Such an issue, isn't it?
It's been the best thing I've done, but it's definitely been the hardest. It's been really challenging.
This society almost puts this pressure on you.
I think the pressure we put on ourselves is way too much.
But the stigma's reducing. There's actually hope there.
It's amazing how much courage you have when you're faced with that kind of adversity. I have to be the best version of myself for my child.
But actually, you're often doing a lot better than you ever realised.
Welcome to Budge, How to Fudge Being Human, the podcast that uses behavioural science, nudge theory and a bit of psychology to help you be better at being a human at work and generally in life. Make sure you check us out on YouTube, like and subscribe, and Apple Podcast, and of course Spotify and all your finest social media platforms. Today we're talking about something a bit different. As always, I'm joined by Dr. Darren Coppin, speaker, writer, behavioural scientist, lover, and I'm actually going to say something sensible for a change. You just told me that you actually created the most successful employment program for returning people to work in the world.
The biggest uplift that was studied, so 48%, yes. But may I introduce you, Paul?
Yes.
To deflect any attention, Managing Director of one of Australia's largest education, training and employment organisations. And also a gentleman, it turns out, thinks that paddleboarding is an American torture methodology.
Anyway. But more importantly, though, than Darren and I, we have an amazing guest today, Sonia McDonald. Thank you so much for joining us. Obviously, we've known each other a few years through the incredible work you've done in leadership. Founder and CEO of Leadership HQ, and of course in the top 100 entrepreneurs in Australia and the top 250 influential women in the world. Writer of 3 books, speaker, doing amazing things in the leadership space. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, thank you so much for
asking.
It's great. I still find it really challenging to hear someone talk about that. I suppose that's that whole humility thing, right? It's sometimes we forget what we've achieved. So thank you. That's a great introduction. But we have known each other for many years, and I've been very blessed to have known you for such a long time.
I was actually reflecting on the fact. Did you know you ran a leadership program for us a few years ago, and it occurred to me with you coming to record the podcast. There's actually people in that program now. We've got somebody in a general management position. Somebody went on, and I think is in a CEO of a small organisation. You've got people in leadership. There's 3 or 4. There was like 12 or 15 in the program a few years ago. There's 3 or 4 in senior leadership positions in government. So I actually, it's only because we started recording the podcast I thought, wow, the impact that had and the long-term outcomes were just incredible. Yeah.
You've made my year.
Yeah, I should probably actually put that all in writing somewhere and send that to you. But yeah, Sonia, obviously people are going to be expecting us to talk about leadership today, but we're actually not going to, because you and I have something very much in common in the fact that we are both full-time single parents. I suppose I'm going to start off with some quite sort of personal questions here to kind of explain where you and I come from in this space. But you are a full-time single mum, a single parent, and you have been, I think, for most of your daughter's life.
Yeah, for 17 years now. Yeah, when she was 4.
Wow.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
And how has that experience sort of changed you?
Oh, I think it's probably been the most courageous thing I've ever done. I keep saying, but when people ask me about it, I say, the universe only gives you what you can handle. And I kind of back then went, no, universe, I don't know about this one. Look, I think it's fundamentally changed who I am. I think it actually took me on the path to where I am now, because obviously when it was just her and I became a full-time solo parent over in Shanghai, China.
Oh wow! So you weren't in Australia when it happened? No. My goodness.
And
so you're a single parent in Shanghai.
Yeah.
And you have to get back to Australia?
Yeah, I write about it in my book actually. The last one I wrote around First Comes Courage, because obviously looking at that time was so courageous. When it happened, we were left with very little money in the bank. Lucky I had a part-time job over there. And I remember going, and everyone had said to me like how stoic I was, and I think there's what's going on here, like you're being really brave and courageous here, and I thought I had to be for my daughter. So, and I remember going and seeing everyone said you need to see a psychologist. So I went and saw a psychologist, and the psychologist, I'm sitting out in the because my ex-husband decided to abandon my daughter and I. And I remember seeing this psychologist, and I was completely devastated. And you can probably read between the lines what happened, but I remember sitting outside of this office to see this psychologist, and she was this American woman, and she brings me in. She says, right, what are your challenges, in an American accent? And I had to do an American accent, but she was saying, and I was like, okay. And then I told her, I literally sat there for an hour, and she said, okay, that's $100. And I went, what? And she said, I don't want to see you ever again. And I said, am I that screwed up, right? I was like, what? And she said, I don't want to see you again. And I said, why? And she said, I want you to leave the country. Get your passports, pack your things, leave. You don't know what's going to happen. We don't have a good, Australia or the government doesn't have the best around that kind of like, if something happens to your daughter here, or you don't know the state of mind of your ex-partner and all this. And
your ex-partner's Australian?
He's from Scotland.
Okay.
Yeah. But he's Australian. And then I went home and spoke to work about it. They were brilliant. And I told him that, I was leaving the country, and he was like, he just went, yeah, whatever. And packed my things, and as soon as I got on the plane, burst into tears when Abby was asleep, and had to come home and start all over again.
Wow.
Had to start my life all over again.
And what did that look like? So you came straight to Brisbane?
I came to the Gold Coast, moved back with Mum and Dad. I was really lucky that the job I had over there, they really wanted to keep me, but it was just too challenging for me, because they kept wanting me to travel, and I couldn't travel because I was looking after Abby by myself.
Yeah.
Mum and my parents were there to help, but it was really challenging. They had other priorities, and it was really challenging trying to find support. I went for about 40 different interviews to see if I could find another job. As soon as the single parent card came up, no one wanted to give me...
It's such an issue, isn't it?
I was just floored, and it wasn't until I met someone that worked in the leadership development space. Honestly, I just had to put a roof over our heads, and I thought, oh my gosh, I've got a degree, I've had all this experience in the industry, and as soon as the single parent card came up, it was, yeah, look, you're too risky, we can't offer you flexibility. Thank goodness things have changed now. I think it was like interview 41, I met someone that was looking for a coach and a facilitator and a consultant to work on construction sites and help engineers and superintendents in the leadership space. And I just basically went in and he said, do you know much about leadership and about this space? And I just said, yeah, I know so much about leadership. I was like, please don't ask me any questions. I was like, okay, I'm going to be faking it here a little bit. I just researched and read. I got the job and I loved it. And that's how I kind of, it's because I had to have that courage for Abby, for my daughter. Like, I knew I had to put a roof over our heads and food on the table, and it was a really desperate time at the time, and that's how Leadership HQ started. I worked for someone else for a few years in the leadership space, and I started it from a blog.
Wow.
So I just sort of thought, look, it's and it's been the best thing I've done, but it's definitely been the hardest. It's been really challenging being a full-time single parent.
I don't know if congratulations is the right word, but it's amazing what you've achieved. It really is. It's fantastic. And my story is very different to yours, and I was the CEO of Busy when I became a single dad, and I had my now 10-year-old. She was 7 at the time. I've had her for 3 years. And it's funny, I then got involved. It's quite weird. I joined this Facebook group. And after I forgot I joined it, and about 2 years ago it popped up that it had been the administrators had abandoned it, and it was going to close down. I thought, I'm going to jump on and become an admin for this Gold Coast single parents group, and it's grown over the last 2 years from about 180 people to 2,500 people, and now it's amazing what it does. And every day on the Gold Coast there's actually social events for single parents who when they don't have the kids. There's trivia and there's party nights, and there's also then events for people to meet up on the weekend and school holidays, and they go out and do stuff. And it's really, for me, I've been, I've struggled, I'll be honest with you, with the mental health side of it. There's been times when I have struggled, particularly when I'm on my own with just, my daughter, and that sort of, that whole isolation and all that sort of thing. But this group has just, it kind of saved me, to be honest. And it saved a lot of people, I think, in many ways on the Gold Coast. But it opened my eyes up. The reality is, I'm fortunate. I'm the CEO of a company. I obviously have a good job. But it's opened my eyes up to the amount of people out there that are dealing with domestic violence issues and basically poverty and housing and social issues. But I want to come back to one of the points that you made, which was that stigma. because so many of them struggle to find work because they cannot find an employer who's willing to be flexible, who's willing to accommodate the fact that, you know what, there are times when their son or daughter is going to be sick, they've got to come home from kindy. And I might throw it to yourself first, Sonia, and then to Darren to maybe explain some of the psychology of this. But, you know, how much did that impact you, the stigma of being a single parent, and to what extent do you think it has kind of improved over the years?
That's a great question. I mean, I think that it's improved. I think COVID really changed that, because obviously now with the flexibility and being able to work from home, look, I still think there is, and I think it's more common than we realise, this whole being a solo parent, being a single parent, but there is still a stigma, right? Like there is still a, you know, the amount of times, unfortunately and fortunately, you know, I spoke about it when I was speaking this morning at this conference, the amount of times I had to bring my daughter because I couldn't find anyone to help me with her. I had to take her to work. I had to sometimes take her to meetings, and she had to sit out the reception. I had to take her to keynotes and put her at the back. Yeah. You know, so, you know, she'd be sitting there going, "Oh, Mum, like, really? Do I have to go to this?" And I'd be like, "I can't leave you at home alone, and I have to work." And if I even had clients. Unfortunately, I lost clients because I was a single parent, because they knew that I didn't have the flexibility that they needed and things. And I thought there is still that, you know, that stigma. And I actually think, and even I actually love employing and supporting other single parents. I actually think we work really hard. Like, I think
I totally agree. It actually makes you want. It makes you want to do more.
Yeah.
You almost feel this need to make up for the fact you're a single parent.
Yeah.
And do you know what's interesting? Come back to that point you're saying about finding work and all that sort of thing. And flexibility. I work so hard to bring these policies into my organisation, the Busy Group. But it's interesting. You still meet managers of certain parts of business that still don't necessarily want to apply that flexibility that I want to at the sort of CEO level. It's amazing how much of that still exists. Darren, mate, we should probably ask you some questions about this, because we should add that you are a dad to 2 boys. Yeah. Which is probably why you're up on the Gold Coast for a few days escaping, mate, is it?
No, I miss them terribly, and they've got a brilliant mum, and you know, they're blessed to be in a joint household, because it's much more common. You know, stigma. The flexible working is making a big difference, and in terms of timing and hours and what have you, making things a little easier. But the stigma's reducing, because in 1960 in the States, 9% of households were single parent households. It's now the highest in the world at 25%.
Where's that? Sorry, the US?
US. Wow. The second highest is Australia and Britain, with about 15%.
Okay.
One of the lowest of developing nations is Turkey, with just 2%. And there are different reasons for that you might.
I assume cultural, religious, that sort of thing.
Yeah, potentially, yeah. And this is Pew, but there were some fascinating things that you said. So the stigma's reducing just because of numbers and practicalities. Yeah. You know, if you've got 15% of the workforce that are potential workforce that are single parents, and you've only got 3-4% unemployment, then you need to accommodate it just practically. Two things you said that were fascinating and really relevant in terms of behavioural science. First of all, you said when you got on the plane, you burst into tears once Abby fell asleep. That's massive, because you did it after she fell asleep. You didn't want her to sit. You wanted to be a rock and solid for her. Now, a lot of parents, single parents, they've got their child, and that's the most. They lean on a child for a young age. They become needy with that child, and that child has to grow up quickly and support the parent. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but if you can protect that child and be really strong and resilient in yourself, that gives them a greater platform, particularly when your Abby was 4 years old when it was happening. That makes a massive difference and a platform for her going forward. Studies show that there is no difference in well-being for children in single-parent households versus 2 parents and what have you. But there can be restrictions or lower development in terms of cognitive development in single-parent households. I can't shy away from what the data's saying, but a lot of that's down to poverty and financial stress and issues. But what I find remarkable...
So can I just jump in? So it's not necessarily the fact that we literally don't have time to sit down and go through the homework and all that sort of stuff. That's what worries me. The amount of time I spend on kiddies' homework is virtually none. It's like, teach yourself,
you know. Because that is a stress, and that's a stress implemented by financial issues, because you've got to go out and work and you're not there as much necessarily. But the households with the best cognitive development of young children and well-being of young children are multi-generational households. So where you of single parents. So actually they do better than husband and wife being together in whatever format the family unit might be, is having a single parent and grandparents there generally, or an auntie and uncle, which reflects most of human history with social groups and communities and what have you. They do the best. Now, the trouble is that most of our parents, we're more disparate. We live further away. They're working themselves, so they have less time. So your parents had other things going on, which puts more pressure on you as well to support Abby. But there's actually hope there, that for example with you had older children, and they almost filled in that role of the grandparents or the uncle and auntie, these multi-generational.
Yeah, absolutely. My older daughter's 21, and she's very much stepped into that kind of additional parent type role, you know. But one of the things I also want to talk about is something that I come across a lot through sort of the single parent world, and I'm sure Sonia, you know, would know the impact of that. What's really interesting for me, as a full-time single dad, the world says to me, oh, bless him, poor bloke, oh, you know, he must be, I bet he doesn't get his washing done, or he needs help with all that. I think there's a far worse stigma of being a single mum still, and I think there's still this level of I don't know, sexism in the world, where people are so much less sympathetic to mums who are full-time single parents than they are to dads. I mean, I don't know what do you find this?
I'm wondering whether it's kind of like, I don't know, this is me just kind of brainstorming this a little bit, because now I'd noticed it, but it wasn't something I was really like noticing, but now that you're talking about it, I do, is that men are probably the main breadwinner. So for a man to be a full-time or single parent, it's like, ooh, it really impacts their ability to, whereas a woman, it's a bit like, oh, but at least they have the husband there, or the ex-husband financially, and it's like, well, I never got that. So, you know, what's the difference between? And that is so common. Yeah,
we almost expect, there seems to be this notion that the dad is still paying money or something, and a lot of the time they're really not. You know, and the CSA, you know, the child support services assess them, and you know, they somehow manage to show that they're making $3 a year or something.
Yeah, so I think that, and especially, and I mean, you know my story around my daughter, and she did develop, unfortunately, some mental health issues because of bullying at school when she was in high school, which was absolutely heartbreaking and debilitating. It was like, here I am out there doing what I do, and then I was getting that judgment around, ooh, you work as a coach and you can't even help your daughter, and you're like, oh wow, you know, and I'm like, hang on, I'm a full-time single parent, like I actually have to work, and other people would judge me and say, well, you should take off work, you shouldn't work if your daughter's dealing with this. I'm like, well, I'm trying to
and they wouldn't say that to a man.
I don't think they would have. I'm wondering whether they would or not. I just don't think they would. You know, I got judged a lot for that, and that was really tough.
So I'm just going to catch myself on something I just said to you. Of course, every instance is individual. I know there's a whole movement of dads out there who don't get to see their kids, that have to pay massive amounts of money, and they still don't get to see their kids. So I just want to recognise that every situation is different. Some dads are doing it really tough,
and I do know that as well. There are some dads doing it really, really tough, and I do hear about that, and it breaks my heart.
Oh, absolutely. Do you think this pressure that single parents put themselves under, because you're talking about what there's that stigma that's just been attached to you, and then this thing that, you know, oh, you should give up work and look after your daughter. If you're a coach, go and coach your daughter. Did you find that challenging then, that this society almost puts this pressure on you to be a mum, and then you also have to earn a living, and you know, there's such high expectations, but do those expectations come from society, or do you think they come from ourselves?
I think it is a bit of both. I think, we've definitely when I became a single mum, I put a lot of pressure on myself. There was a lot of guilt. The guilt was all consuming. I definitely think society does a little bit as well, You know, the whole single mum. I do think it's getting better from when that was 17 years ago. It's definitely different today.
Yeah.
I definitely think this pandemic has definitely shaped because of the flexibility piece and things like that. Look, I still think, I mean, I do see other women that are single mums. The thing that breaks my heart a little bit, and here we are trying to help women get back into the workforce, right, and help women into leadership roles. My career took a massive step back when I became a single parent.
Yeah.
And it, you know, for years and years I had to try and get myself back. You know, and I don't know how women do it really, or, you know, obviously men as well, not any single parents, but it definitely puts a challenge in your well-being, on able to earn a living, your career and things like that. I think that, but I think personally it's probably more us. I think the pressure we put on ourselves is way too much.
Yeah, agree. And I do it myself. You know, I sit there on my laptop at 7 or 8 o'clock at night thinking, I really need to do this because I picked up Kitty today from school because, you know, I didn't have anyone to pick her up. So you end up doing those sort of things to make up for it, and I'm sure go far more beyond what's necessary. If you could go back then and sort of look at everything that's happened, is there anything that you would change in the way you do things, or advice that you would give to people that are about to become single parents or have recently become single parents? Because there are so many people, you see it on Facebook groups every day. There's people becoming single parents all the time and have no real idea as to what to expect, what to do. Would you have any advice to them? What were your key learnings, you know, through that whole process of you know, when Abby was 4 and starting all over again?
It's a really great question. There's so much I would actually say to her. I definitely say to her that she's got it. She's got this. It's amazing how much courage you have when you're faced with that kind of adversity. To trust the journey. Again, I put way too much pressure on myself, and that did translate down to Abby. So there was an element, she put a lot of pressure on herself. She's studying social work now at university. Great career. And she comes home now all the time. There a few months ago, we were sitting having Mexican. She burst out crying in the middle of this Mexican restaurant. I'm sitting there looking at her going, why are you crying so much? And she went, I didn't realise as a single parent how tough it was for you, and how from a social perspective, like now I'm studying social work, I have a complete new appreciation for, and I just sat there going, finally she got it. But the thing is they will get it. Like, I think looking at her now, she is the most kind, courageous, beautiful young woman, even though we had so many challenges and ups and downs with her having to also be a child with a single parent. I wish I'd shown her a lot more empathy and compassion. So there was times where I was like, you're just going to have to go to childcare. You're going to have to, and I wish I'd been a lot more, a lot more empathy, for kindness for myself and for her. I
actually don't know. I don't know the answer to that though, Sonia, because I have the same issue where you just feel crap sometimes. Because listen, you got to do this, and you don't have a choice often, you know.
They do get it. Yeah. They do. Like Abby now goes, all those times that I was so angry with you, Mum, and now I look at you and I love you so much more because I saw what you had to go through to bring me up and give me my opportunities, and I saw how hard you worked. I think the other thing that made a huge difference, and I think for Abby, is even though what happened was horrible, whatever circumstances, whether it is an amicable breakup or whatever circumstances you become a single parent, there's lots of different ways, is I always stayed true to myself in front of Abby. Like, I never was, you know what I mean? Like, I was never angry, or I always just went, this is the way it is, and I'm going to love each day and be the best I can be each day. And I think she didn't see any of that, like kind of even my ex-husband would look at me and go, what I did to you was absolutely horrendous, but you're still staying. And I said, because there's no point in me getting angry. I have to be the best version of myself for my child. I have to make sure, because it's the child you've got to think about. Like, I just kept thinking the best thing I need to do is focus on being the best role model for my daughter. That's awesome. That's all you can do.
I know with myself that the dad that my daughter gets now is so much more happier than the one 8 years ago. I'm a lot happier. I've been through some really difficult times in the last 7 or 8 years, but she gets a far happier, a far more engaged dad, to be honest with you. And I sort of asked you earlier about somebody's about to become a single parent. I guess I'll throw to you on this one, Darren, is that this is such a major conversation to have, is that so many families do stay together, and parents stay together when often it's not the right thing. And I know that I was so unhappy, and it wasn't good for my kids. Is there much behavioural science and psychology around this notion of staying together for the sake of the kids versus the benefits of actually separate?
Yeah, and it's completely contradictory. I've read a lot of studies that say definitively that mental health issues in children of single parents are higher than those of married couples. I've read a lot of studies that replicate what you said, Sonia, is often the children say, I didn't realise how difficult it was for you. That's them also saying, it didn't mess me up inside. What you went through, I was almost oblivious and impervious to it. And kids are resilient, but actually you're often doing a lot better than you ever realise you're doing with the children and protecting them. And it's also there's a great quote here that separation, and from a study by Morrison and Coiro, separation and divorce are associated with increased behaviour problems in children. But in marriages that don't break up, higher levels of marital conflict have greater impacts on the children. Yeah. And so I guess should you stay, should you split, depends on the level of conflict within that relationship. And again, the key thing as well is to surround yourself with a network of family, friends, and create a network of family and friends to make it easier when you are on your own, you supporting them supporting you. But that's the key difference. You've got to know, and you've got to be brave, that if that conflict is really bad, you need to get out for the sake of your kids.
Do you know, we usually do these podcasts for about 20 minutes, but this one could easily go for about another half an hour, I think. But unfortunately, we probably do have to wrap it up.
Yeah.
Sonia, thank you so much. I know this, we obviously first started talking about doing some leadership podcasts, and this was something very different. But the single parent thing is something I'm incredibly passionate about. I think through this Gold Coast community social group with single parents that I'm involved with, you do see how challenging it is, and I do consider myself very fortunate, despite some of the difficulties over the years of being a single parent. I do consider myself so much fortunate than most people. Thank you for talking to us about this. It is appreciated that you opened yourself up around this issue.
Well, thank you so much. I just wanted to add, actually, before you were talking, when you said advice, I definitely think just the last piece of advice is to definitely ask for help.
Yep.
So don't be afraid to go. It takes a child to bring up a child, so don't be afraid to kind of reach out to people and friends and ask for help, and don't be afraid to take them to work. Honestly, my daughter now, she's like, the amount of times she's seen me speak or she's come to work, and she's so savvy now because she's been exposed to that space. So
it makes a huge thing.
Yeah, expose them to your work. When you expose and talk about your work, then they become a lot more, okay, I get what she's trying to do, or what my mum or dad's trying to achieve, when they feel they're part of stuff as well. So, but no, it's been a real honour speaking to you today.
And if you're a leader out there who doesn't have experience of single parenting, make space for it, allow them to bring the kids in, be flexible, do all those things to help them. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it. And thank you, Dr. Darren, as always, for your wise words.
Thank you.
As always, you can find us on Spotify, Apple, YouTube. You can also connect with us on LinkedIn, TikTok, and Facebook. Like and subscribe, please, and leave your comments. Thank you for watching.